Synthetic polymers, the fully synthetic fibers. Now, as we cover this section, you'll notice one name that pops up again and again and again. This is the DuPont Chemical Corporation, which is still in business today. And they are really the company that changed fabric and ushered in a new era of synthetic fibers. Similar to the natural polymer process, the viscose process, and other variations of it, the method used to produce synthetic polymers is basically a very complex series of chemical reactions that end in extrusion by spinnerets and then being spun into yarns, which then of course will be woven or knit into fabrics. They're again very similar, but the synthetic polymers are made in a way more similar to plastics, as they require petroleum to create the chemical compounds needed for the synthetic polymer process. The only thing that is natural, again, about our natural synthetics or natural polymers is that we start with a natural input. In their case, mostly tree pulp or wood pulp. Here, we use straight chemicals. But it is important to note that all synthetic fibers or synthetic polymers, again, can be thought of as a type of plastic, and so they are a petroleum product. The first fully synthetic polymer, was invented by researcher Wallace Hume Carruthers for DuPont Chemical Corporation in 1935. Nylon was first used as bristles in toothbrushes, and shortly after was used to create stockings. Both products still almost exclusively use nylon. Nylon is incredibly strong. It has great resistance to sunlight and abrasion, so it is very easy to care for. Nylon can vary in luster from very shiny to dull. Nylon can be dyed easily and will keep color well. When we think of strength, we think of nylon. Ropes today are almost exclusively made of nylon. This is because nylon is incredibly strong and so can make very, very strong ropes. In addition to being very strong, they are resistant to degradation caused by mold or mildew or anything else like that. So before nylon, ropes were mostly made by hemp, which were very strong. They're very good at making rope. However, it being a natural plant-based fiber, it was prone to mildew and decay and rot. Not so, however, with nylon. It being more akin to plastic, will not mold, will not mildew, and will not rot. So today, most ropes we see are made with nylon. Same with stockings. You might not think stockings are very strong, as you've probably worn them and they snag easily. But consider how thin they are. For being so very thin, they are actually quite strong. Polyester. Polyester was first invented by British scientists for the Imperial Chemical Industries. However, the rights for this polymer were bought by DuPont in 1946. Polyester is strong and durable and is resistant to wrinkling, so it makes clothing that is very easy to care for. However, it is non-absorbent, making it very water resistant. So, the fabric it makes does not breathe well. Polyester, however, can insulate relatively well. Polyester is most often blended with cotton. Polyester became very popular in sort of the late 60s and 70s, as it was really first gaining traction as a commercially viable product and being used by designers. It sort of hit a new trendy cachet as being sort of cheap and easy to care for. It is still widely used today, but its popularity has waned some, as any new product or fad will wane a bit after its novelty wears off. However, it is still a very good way to make a cheaper product. We mostly see it now blended again with cotton or other natural fibers as a way to make the clothing a bit cheaper. 100% polyester can still be seen, but is a bit more rare than it was, let's say, in the 70s. Acrylic. Acrylic is another invention of the DuPont Chemical Corporation. It was invented in 1941 but wasn't produced in large quantities until the 1950s. Acrylic is made as a synthetic wool. So most of the uses for acrylic would be places wool might have been used. So we see it to make cheaper suitings, we see it in yarns, we see it many times in sweaters, cheaper sweaters. Acrylic is stronger than wool and insulates well, but not quite as well as wool. It's hard to beat wool in its insulative properties. Like all synthetics, it is easy to care for and resists pilling better than wool. So you don't have to go through all the rigmarole that you have to in care for wool. Wool shrinks, wool pulls, wool's sensitive to strong detergents, blah, blah, blah. Not so much with acrylic. Acrylic can stand up to all the abuse. Another popular use for wool is in knitting. As it is easier to care for and cheaper, most of the yarns used for hobby knitting today are made from acrylic. It's also easier to dye than wool. Spandex. Spandex was invented by a scientist named Joseph Shivers for, you guessed it, the DuPont Chemical Corporation. So spandex is a brand name, and it's an anagram for expands, which is exactly the benefit of spandex. It is the only fiber in existence that is inherently stretchy. No other fiber is stretchy on its own. It also goes by other brand names like Lycra or Elastine. This fiber has revolutionized the fashion industry with its elastic properties. It is most often seen blended with other fibers to give them some stretch. But we can see fabrics on its own. We can see spandex creating fabrics on its own with a variety of different types, weights, and finishes. No other invention has had such an impact on the fashion industry as spandex. Really, it's quite amazing. We now can create stretch versions of woven fabrics, which was never possible before. We also can create fabrics that cling and hold to the body very, very well. For instance, the skinny jean craze of, about a decade ago was never possible without spandex, because you could never make denim so tight to the body that it was in any way wearable. You wouldn't have been able to even get on skinny jeans without the aid of spandex, which gives it that little bit of stretch needed so you can put it on and wear it comfortably while it still hugs the body and creates that very tight silhouette. I'd also like to mention all of these fabrics, these synthetic polymers, were all created or at least bought up very quickly by the DuPont Chemical Corporation. Now, DuPont is not a name often on the lips of people into fashion. However, there is no other greater influence in 20th century fashion into the 21st than this corporation. It is a good way to remind us that fashion is not just a design category. When we talk about fashion and we talk about textiles, we're talking about chemistry. We're talking about material sciences. We talk about technology. Often these names are not as readily remembered or brought up by people who like to discuss fashion history. In the 20th century, we like to shout out names like Coco Chanel or Dior or others that seemingly have revolutionized the fashion industry. However, I would like to pose that there is no designer in the 20th century or other that has made a bigger impact on fashion than the scientists, not fashion designers, at the DuPont Chemical Corporation. This is seen in our clothing today. Look through your clothing. You will see synthetic fibers everywhere. We can see it in the consumption. We can see it in how they've changed, how clothing behaves, how we wear clothes, what we wear clothing for, has all been changed by synthetic fibers. Even our abilities to be able to do things have been greatly expanded by the invention of synthetic polymers. One other note on spandex, it has also revolutionized athletic wear. As we can see the bathing suit up here, many sports or garments made specifically for high performance in sports and for athletes utilize spandex